This is the Real Digital Transformation podcast series, empowering technology and business professionals to succeed with digital transformation. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and series editor of the Pearson Digital Enterprise series, Thomas Earl.
Hi, this is Thomas Earl, and welcome to another edition of the Real Digital Transformation podcast series. Today I have with me Robert Buda, the principal database consultant at Buda Consulting and a thought leader in data management. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Nice to be here.
Super. So what we're discussing today is something I find really interesting and something that I think hasn't been discussed enough, which is how AI is impacting and affecting the world of data management, database management, and how we approach data architectures in our enterprises. I know it's something that you're focusing on a great deal these days. Starting with just the big picture, what does that intersection look like, and how have you seen AI change how we approach database management in particular?
So it's the relationship between data and AI is really a circular one. And what I mean by that is data impacts AI and AI impacts data. So right now, the tools that we typically use, that most companies use, are the large language models like Llama 3 and OpenAI's ChatGPT. And those tools are trained on data from the internet, non-corporate specific data. And they're very, very useful. They do a great job of helping you do things like, write really good emails, and they even help with some research, but they do very little with your own corporate data. In fact, they don't know anything about your own corporate data, hopefully, because a lot of your corporate data needs to be confidential. So there's a few things that happen when we combine our own corporate data with those large language models. And as I say, it's kind of circular. So you could think of a pathway going from your corporate data to that LLM in multiple stages. And the first stage is we take our corporate data, and I won't go into too much detail on how this works because it gets very technical, but we take our corporate data and we use that initially to essentially add context to the prompt that we might be using for ChatGPT. So for example, if we want to use one of those chat bots that we see everywhere, and we want to use that to help us respond to a customer's inquiry, ChatGPT doesn't know anything about that customer. What we can do is we can take that inquiry and we can combine it with our corporate data and add context to that inquiry. I'm not saying that word very well, inquiry. And it essentially, then we can take that corporate data and pass it into the model. So it adds flavor, it adds context to the query that we just asked. So that's the first. The first step is taking our corporate data and enhancing our query so we can get better results.
A quick question about that. So in that particular scenario, the context you're adding from your corporate data, is that your data's knowledge of that specific customer?
It could be anything. So that's one perfect example. Another example is our product line or information about the products that we sell or the services that we sell.
Okay.
So we want to give as much flavor as we can, as much information as we can to that model, while still using the general model. And the reason for that is because, if all we did, if we just tried to build our own plain vanilla model that's not trained on all of the information available out there on the internet, it's not going to be a very smart model, right? It's only going to have the information that's in our corporate database. It's not going to know information about the real world, about anything outside of our data. So it's important that we combine those two things. So yes, we're going to take the information about our corporation, about our customers, about our products, about our processes, about our policies, and that can all become context for the query that we ask to the model that has been trained on everything else out there. Does that make sense?
Right. So is it somewhat like a transfer learning approach whereby you take an existing LLM with a lot of base knowledge and then you further augment and customize the model by further training it with your corporate data so that you end up with a fully trained model that has your business context built into it?
So that's kind of right.
Okay.
So let me try to paint a better picture of that. When a model gets trained on, initially, when, let's say ChatGPT or Llama 3, when they get trained initially, all the data that gets put into that model, the data itself doesn't get stored in the model. Instead, all that data is encoded in neural networks and other structures that the model uses. When we take our context, like our customer information in the way that I just described it, we're not actually training the model. What we're really doing is we're every model when we ask a question, we're asking it in what's called a context window. So we're giving it a bunch of information about our question, and what I'm describing about using our customer data in this first phase is really just taking pertinent customer information and adding it to that context window. So it doesn't really train the model. So in other words, after I ask that first question, that information that isn't stored in the model. We would need to augment each question after that with that same context if we wanted it to know that information. Does that make sense? Am I being clear about that?
Sure. So it's a separate body of custom logic that processes.
It's right. It's pre-processing for the query.
Okay.
Now, so that's the flow that I'm describing right now. Mm-hmm. We can, if we wish, train the model using our corporate data so that the model does have all of our corporate information in it. That's a different process, and it requires a different data flow, and it requires a lot of processing to do that. So I'm not describing that end of it. Right now, I'm describing the front end of simply taking an established model and using the context window to give it more information about our organization so the model can do a better job of answering the question, even though the model hasn't been pre-trained in our data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I mean, looking overall at how the availability of AI, large language models, and the whole new way we have to look at data in terms of how it relates to AI from a training perspective, of how it relates to AI from a production input, output perspective, and how it relates to our corporate data, which you were just talking about. What do you further see happening right now in terms of how those perspectives are changing, or how we have to reprioritize, aspects of how we approach data in general in our organization?
Sure, that great question. So whether we do what I just described in that kind of pre-processing of the queries, or whether we take that further step and actually train the model, either way, we need to add context to our data. In other words, in order to be able to do either of those types of things, when we look into our database, when the model, if an AI model looks into our database, it needs to know what it's looking at in order to draw proper inferences. So we need to add what we call metadata or context in the database. So, for example, if we have a CRM that has our customer data in it, the column names and the row names, the various the structure of the database doesn't always give enough information, so the process that's reading your data knows what it means. So it's very important that we go in and we ensure that it's very obvious where what each field means. Whether it's a customer address or whether it's a customer name or longevity, when the customer started with us. All of that kind of information that'll be very important to an AI system, but that you don't know what it might want until you ask the question. So we really need to do a better job of metadata, of setting up that context within the database. It also becomes very important. It's always been important to have clean data. It's even more important now because the power of AI is that it can produce full answers to your questions. And we're kind of tempted to just take what that AI application does and use it. And if we're going to want to rely on it and trust it that much, we need to know that the data is completely accurate. And so there's a lot of processing that we want to do to the data before we expose it to an AI engine. Things like deduplication and things like making sure that all the fields are populated when they need to, because an AI model can make stuff up if it doesn't have a particular piece of information.
Right. So a couple of questions regarding the two things you just mentioned. In the first topic you talked about where it's important now to have more data, more metadata to enrich our existing relational data so that there's as much meaning and context behind it. So in a corporation that already has a lot of legacy data, that has, all the stuff they've accumulated for years or decades, going back into that and trying to add metadata to what's already there, is that something organizations are doing? Is that a step they're actually taking to accommodate how they will then bring in and incorporate AI systems that'll process that data? Or
yes,
yeah, okay,
yes, and so here's where the circular thing comes in, where I mentioned earlier that it's kind of a circular relationship. We can actually use regular AI models to build that metadata. So in other words, we can use different AI systems that are out there, and we can have it read our corporate data. Now, we would only do this with local copies of a model. I want to stress that you'd never want to do something like this, with OpenAI's ChatGPT that's used in on their environment.
Sure.
This is something you'd want to make sure you bring locally. But you can actually use those models to take a look at your data and suggest proper metadata, and it makes that process of building metadata and adding context easier. It doesn't fully automate it, but it makes it easier. So based on table name and column names, and based on typical information that it's seeing in the table, it can guess at what things are. And then a human being goes in and kind of validates, yes, this is correct, this is what it is, and it can help build that metadata much more quickly. So that's where it's kind of circular. So AI can be used to augment the information that's in our database, as well as the other way around.
Okay, and then similarly, can we use AI as a tool to help clean our legacy data?
Absolutely, yes. Good. Another good question. There have always been tools out there that help us clean our data. Things like Melissa data comes to mind. There are tools that help us kind of see the anomalies in our data and clean them up. No question that AI, enhances our ability to do that. And I would encourage folks to use that because it will speed up the process. But the caveat, I always have the same caveat with AI. We're still at a point you need a human to validate, anything you do with AI, and but it can significantly speed up, any process that you do with data.
So again, I'm just thinking of these larger corporations that have so much legacy data that will now become important and valuable when it's processed by an AI system for predictive analytics and so on. And the fact that you can use AI as a tool to help add metadata, to help clean all that legacy data. But where does the human play a part in all that? Because a human won't be able to review thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of records to see if the AI tools, did what they were supposed to do properly. How can a human fulfill that quality assurance role?
So let's imagine that we have a table that has 100 columns in it, and we use an AI tool to say, suggest for me what the real contents, what a description would be for each of these columns, right? Mm-hmm. So the AI system can provide, a list of those names and descriptions, metadata around those columns, and then the human being. This would be a human being who knows the environment, right? I mean, it would have to be somebody who kind of, has some context in the environment, but they'll, it's just a visual check to say, oh yeah, that's right. This column does indeed have information on, the mailing address, or something else. So it does. I mean. I'm not minimizing the amount of work the human has to do. I'm just saying the AI can make it easier by making the upfront suggestions.
Mm-hmm. So just one quick question about that particular role. Is it more like a spot check that the human does to just randomly check every, X amount of rows or columns or records? Or does the human also are there agents, programs out there that can also assist with checking the quality of recently updated or augmented data in preparation for use by an AI system?
Yes, there are. You can certainly build agents to do that, or use agents to do that. And in fact, when models are trained in general, that's kind of how it works. In fact, questions are asked, and the results of those questions are validated by agents, and it's kind of a circular process to confirm that the model was trained properly. But that's not sure that's really what you were asking about. I think you were asking about the metadata and whether the metadata is correct.
Yeah, whether there are tools and agents available to the human to perform that quality assurance of the data that has been updated or augmented by AI tools. Yeah.
So it's a mix, right? It's a mix of humans and agents that would be used. And I think as the human looks at things, they may decide, I need an agent to help me with this because this is a particularly difficult thing to validate. It also depends on the importance of that piece of information. If it's an address, that's one level of importance. If this is some technical data that's in a power plant, that's another whole level of importance, and it would need a much higher level of rigor.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of our session, but I just, I've asked you questions about corporations that have a lot of legacy data, but now looking on the other side of things, if I was a data architect, a database administrator, if I was the person responsible for data modeling for an organization that wants to build a brand new data architecture that's going to have new databases accumulating new data, so a clean sheet. Now, knowing with the foreknowledge of the fact that this data will all be relevant to AI systems that'll be in place, perhaps we don't know the extent of the AI systems that will be used or what their purpose will be, but we know it's going to be part of our environment. With that opportunity to do things right from the beginning, how would someone like that approach it differently than they may have traditionally?
So a challenge that big organizations have is that a lot of the databases that are in their organizations were likely created very many years ago. And many different systems are there created by many different people. Master data management is a discipline that has it has become more and more important as time has gone by. And an organization starting from scratch has the opportunity to begin right away with a master data management discipline. And essentially what that means is identifying, throughout any systems that are built, because you're always going to have the case where there's multiple systems with multiple databases serving different parts of the organization. And what's really critical, and this is part of the metadata management that has to happen when you're working with AI in an established organization, you need to know across all those systems where the same data lives. So you need to know, in the CRM database, this is the customer number. Where is the customer number stored in the accounting system, for example? And a master data management system helps you do that. So it organizes, pieces of information, and it identifies where they live in each system in the organization. That's typically a master data management initiative is typically undertaken in a large organization when they're building a data warehouse. Pre-AI, they would do that when they're building a data warehouse. Now they'll be doing it whether or not they have a data warehouse in order to facilitate use by AI. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. And I'm just curious. One other aspect to this, when you're modeling relational data and you're deciding how this body of data might relate to other bodies of data within the same database or cross databases, in traditional approaches, you try to optimize the data to avoid redundancy, create those relationships, perhaps end up with complex relationships in some cases. Does that all stay the same? Do the principles of data modeling carry forward into an organization that'll be fully AI enabled? Or are there ways to change that to better optimize or prepare for how this data will be used by AI systems?
I believe it at the lowest level of where the data is stored in the organization, in the systems of record. I believe it will always be the case that the relational type model for structured data will endure. There are some who disagree with that, and I respect their opinion. There are some that think that AI will alleviate the need to structure any data at all. I think that's unlikely to happen. Throughout, I've been working with databases for 30 years, and there have been a number of times throughout that period where people have thought relational data modeling was on its way out, but it has always endured. And I think that just at the end of the day, having structure around your most important data will always enable you to use it more effectively. That's what I think. But,
Mhm.
AI is changing everything so quickly that if you ask me that question a year from now, you might get a different answer.
The logic behind the counterpoint you mentioned is that you don't have to do the relational modeling yourself because AI will likely be smart enough to figure out those relationships for you.
That's correct. That is the logic. But I feel that AI is only smart because you're giving it good information about your data. And you can only do that if your data is structured well and has good metadata and good context around it. So I feel like if we just throw tons of data at it and assume the AI will figure out what that data is, I don't think it has. I don't think we're giving it as much information as we need to make it as smart as it can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that may just be a bias that I have because I've been doing it this way for a very long time.
It makes sense to me. I mean, the more that the AI system will have to go on based on what we provided, you would assume the better the quality.
That's my thinking.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Great. So, Bob, thank you so much. Before we conclude, can you tell us more about Buda Consulting and what you do and what's ahead for you this year?
Oh, sure. So we've been managing customers' mission critical data for over 20 years now. I've been doing this for 30 years myself, and our main goal, the most important thing to us is that our customers' data is safe, that it's always there when they need it, and that they are always prepared for the unexpected. The main thing that we do is database maintenance on an ongoing monthly basis. Our goal is to be invisible because if we need to get involved in restoring a database or something, it means something went wrong. So we really want to be kind of in the background and not have to ever get that call. So we are very, very diligent about ensuring that the database is well maintained, very secure. And in addition to our database maintenance, we also do application development. And for this year, we're really jumping into AI in a big way. We did not do a lot with AI last year. We were just kind of waiting to see where this all went. But now what we are building is a service that'll help people connect their corporate data with AI models in a secure manner, in that kind of circular loop that I mentioned. So we both will use AI to help enhance our customers' data, and we'll use our customers' data to help the customer get more out of the AI model.
Super, which is critical to getting success with your investment in AI and also getting good results that I think that, it can't be understated how important the attention that we have to give our data in order to get the most out of AI systems, or to avoid AI systems giving us output that may not be accurate, which can lead to bad things. And Bob, just before we finish, could you please tell us how people can reach you and learn more about your consulting services?
Oh, sure. Please, they can visit us at budaconsulting.com/realdigital. And that's BUDA consulting.com.
Bob, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and insights today. Looking forward to perhaps speaking with you again, maybe later this year or next year, to see where all this has gone by then.
I would enjoy that. It would be interesting to take another checkpoint, because in just 6 months, so much may change.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, thanks again, Bob.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Follow Thomas on LinkedIn